Alright friends, how's it going? Zig coming in at the beginning of the interview. Today I have Elizabeth McCullough of Alpha Cat. Her latest release, Thatchered Roof Glass House, is available on all streaming platforms. Elizabeth is a multi-talented artist. Expertise finds many different homes. She is a singer-songwriter, a record producer, and now a record label owner, Aquamarine Records, and she was a photographer. In our conversation, it goes deep, it bounces everywhere. It hits upon some mental health recovery, and it's a stigmatized thing that isn't talked about too much, so I was really glad to have this conversation with someone who's been through it and has come out of it. On her website, she has a live recording for sale, Alpha Cat, from 2005 at the Vox Pop Club, featuring Chris Butler, who you might remember from a few episodes ago. All proceeds of this record go to help people find mental health. There's more details of how within the links below and on her website. And this record is in honor of Elizabeth's therapist who passed away, and only after she passed away did she realize how much she helped. Before we dive into the interview, we're going to check out a tune. Here is Mockingbird off Thatchered Roof Glass House by Alpha Cat.
Black sheep, too deep, can't sleep. Let go, slow ride, low tide couldn't hurt a fly. Don't try to know, don't even try. Action spoke. Not to feel so much, don't you know, love? You got to shut up or go. Be yourself or be loved. Be yourself or be loved. Be yourself or be loved. Shoot the messenger if you don't want to hear the news. Stay away from him if you don't want to catch the too intense, cover up your eyes. Never look in the book, the cover will suffice. Don't glow, don't shine, it's a sin. Mockingbird never heard, he just blends right in.
Alpha Cat, Mockingbird. If you're on Spotify, you're not hearing this. You're hearing a gap, and I'm talking about it now. If you follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple, or any of the other podcast platforms, which I think we're on everything now, you can hear the tune, or if you check out Alpha Cat on any of the streaming platforms. Wow, doesn't this mic sound good? This mic sounds good. I got a new mic thanks to Studio 44. Studio 44 CLE has been mixing the podcast and making it sound good, making it listenable. Besides my caffeinated ramblings, it's going to sound clean because of Mr. Jay Sparrow from Studio 44 mixing this podcast, making it sound good. If you have any audio needs, make sure you reach out to Studio 44 CLE, and they'll make anything you got sound good. Here we go. Alpha Cat. Hello. I don't know what happened. I lost you. But I appreciate you checking out.
And I'm on wireless, so, I mean, my wireless is pretty strong.
Okay.
That's why I want to do Skype instead of phone, because the phone drops out a lot more.
Gotcha.
Generally, Zoom, I don't really use Skype much, but Zoom doesn't ever seem to drop out for me. But Skype I haven't used in over a year, so we'll see what happens, I guess.
Well, if we need to bounce to Zoom, I think we can. With Zoom, you gotta like pay for it to go over half an hour. I think that's
well,
why.
I have an account.
Oh, okay. Well, if you got one, sweet, cool. So if this starts to like constantly drop out, we can just hop on that.
Yeah, no, I have an account because I do meetings on there, and I do astrological readings on there.
Oh, so, nice. Was it like getting readings or giving readings?
Giving.
Oh, okay, cool.
I mean, I get them. Okay, I get them sometimes. I actually had one last night that I had forgotten I signed up for.
Yeah.
Because I signed up for it at least 6 months ago, and then it popped up in my calendar, and I'm like, did I have an appointment? I didn't realize that I actually had an appointment. I thought I was on a waiting list.
Gotcha. Was it good?
It was amazing, yeah.
Nice.
Amazing.
I have a friend, it's funny, I have a friend who does, she does readings, online psychic stuff, and like does tarot readings and stuff like that over, I don't know, she goes through some company. But it's a crazy, it's kind of crazy that, it makes sense now with the pandemic, but she was doing that before. It was like, that's a crazy market that exists. You know what I mean? A crazy line of help.
Yeah, the cool thing about the program, the astrological program that I have in Zoom, is that if I'm looking at someone's chart and I want to point out a planet,
you can pull it up.
90% of the time, they will make a blue circle around the planet. So it makes it much clearer which one I'm talking about.
That is cool. That's the one cool thing about, like, so my day gig is I'm a teacher, and for a while we couldn't go room to room. We had to do, like, we'd zoom in to the other rooms, right?
Uh-huh.
And, like, some things are almost easier to explain when you can pull stuff up like that. Like, when you can pull up what you're looking at, it's supposed to be in, like, this is how we play this. Look at this. I can be like, pull up a video, or I can zoom into a spot and everyone sees it because it's what's being presented. You can't really miss it. It's the whole screen.
Hey, it's the age of Aquarius, baby. We're all connected by technology.
Beautiful.
It's a global community now.
That's awesome. I was trying to like, trying to find out, like, I don't know. So with like Zoom and stuff, there's no right or wrong way to do it. You know what I mean? Like, no, I don't know if there's a better program to use than another. Like, a lot of them offer different things that the other ones don't. Like, I don't know if you've messed with like the Google Hangs or
no, I don't. You know, I try not to give money to people that already have way too much money.
Well said.
So, you know, of course now Zoom is probably, you know.
Yeah, they're doing good.
Yeah, they're doing very well.
They're doing good.
Well, because people realize that it's an excellent way to have meetings and communicate with people, because you can share things on the screen.
It was interesting. Like, it just, when the whole pandemic started, that platform became so like on everyone's radar. Like in Cleveland, we had this shutdown, right? And one of the local singer-songwriters, she started this thing called virtual shows. And you would log into a Zoom, And to get the code, you had to donate like $5 or donate $1, and then you can hang out. And they did like a songwriter in the round type thing when it was like 4 artists, 3 songs each. And
Right.
it was super cool because like the medium didn't work too well for sound at the time. I think it's a little better now, and like or it's more clear of how to run your guitar rig through a board into a Zoom meeting. Whatever, there's new techniques to do it or whatever. But like at the time, it was
figure that one out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about that original sound button. That's what I learned. But it's cool.
I mean, I used to be like, basically, I mean, it's not that I was a Pro Tools pro, but I knew my way around. I could do what I wanted. I knew, I knew it. And then I had, I don't know if you're aware that I had the 12-year breakdown where I sing. And so then, during that time when I would emerge from my cocoon occasionally, I took this Pro Tools class, which was not cheap, but you were allowed to audit it again, I think 2 or 3 times. And it was like 10 days in a row, 9 to 6 or 9 to 7. And it was an amazing teacher. And he was really helpful. And even when I came back and audited, he paid me just as much attention and gave me just as much help as if I were, one of the paying students. And through him, after going back in my cocoon, at one point I thought, well, I have these tracks from what was going to be Venus Smile. There's 7 with vocals. Maybe it would be interesting to see what they sounded like mixed.
Yeah.
So I reached out to him, and he initially said yes, and then he said, well, I'm too busy, but I'm going to refer you to this guy in Miami who blows me out of the water. And that was Brett Thorngren, Cosmo.
Okay.
And he mixed the stuff. And a friend of mine who's supportive, very supportive, and I listened to it, and we were both blown away. But at that point, I was still in the mindset of I'm never doing music again. So I put it away. But then when I finally did emerge from the cocoon, I hope I'm not overusing the metaphor.
It's what it is, so it's perfect for it.
And I decided at some point in June of 2019, because for years I had a couple of friends who had heard the tracks, and they're like, why don't you put it out as an EP? And I'm like, no, I'm only going to put it out if it's the full album. And then in June 2019, I went to lunch with a woman. I met her in Harlem. I bought her lunch because she was living in a halfway house and got like $30 a week for money. And so I bought her lunch, and then I went to go see a movie, and I had some time to wait. So I was sitting on the park bench outside of on Central Park West waiting to go to the movie, and it just popped into my head, I want to put this out. And I texted Cosmo. I hadn't talked to him in years. And he immediately texted me back and said, your music just came up 2 weeks ago, and I was thinking about you. And he was like, I'm all in.
Nice. It's weird how like serendipical things are like that. When something sparks in your mind and like you reach out to someone in Miami from New York, that's a large distance and probably even further. It's weird how like things surface in different people from far away.
Well, he's like one of my best friends. I call him my work husband, and I've never seen him. I've never met him in person.
Interesting. Huh. So is that almost like, I don't know, relationships like that, especially now in a time where that type of relationship is more prominent, I imagine, than before because of the COVID thing.
Right.
Is there almost like just hearing someone? Do you hear them more when you can only hear them? Not that you guys can like Skype or whatever or meet up, but when you spend a majority of your time probably like communicating over the phone or through text or through email, Is there a more like sincere thing with what people say?
Well, that's been my experience.
Yeah.
I have seen him. When I was in London, we were working on the mixing, or the mixing, of Thatched Roof. He would call me. I would be out at 6 a.m. sitting on the front step of the hotel,
Yeah.
smoking my morning cigarette, and he would FaceTime me, and I'd be like, "Can I curse?" No, I'm asking you. Is there cursing allowed on this program?
Oh, can I curse? Sorry, I thought you said, "Can I go first?" I was like, "Oh yeah, you can totally go first. Fine." What was? Oh yeah, you can totally curse. No, it's fine.
Okay, so I was like, "What the fuck are you doing up?" Because it's 6 a.m. here, which means, in Miami, or I guess at that point he was in Atlanta. He had moved to Atlanta.
Wow.
And he's
everywhere.
like, "Well, he has 2 young kids. He's like, I've got to get up at 3 if I want to have any time to myself and work." So, I'd be like in my little tiny hotel room, which just had a twin bed and room to, have my suitcase and my computer on the desk and a little tiny bathroom. And I would lay on that tiny twin bed, which was, I must say, very comfortable, and listen to mixes through my laptop, which I had bought, before I thought any of this was happening. The only reason I bought my new MacBook Pro, which was from 2019 now, but
Still
was
pretty
because
new.
my rent, the rent for my building switched to only online, and I could not upgrade my system enough to pay the rent. And they wouldn't accept a check.
Yeah.
And my computer was from 2008. And it would have kept going, except I couldn't pay my rent.
Yeah.
So I bought this MacBook Pro because it's like, if I'm going to buy a MacBook, I'm going to buy the best one.
Yeah.
And then it turns out, I'm mixing records, I'm doing graphic design, I'm making videos, and then of course the pandemic, and and then we're Zooming, and it's like, I learned after what happened with Pearl Harbor, that the original Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, not the record.
That things are happening that I may know about subconsciously, but I'm not going to know that they're real until they actually happen. And so it transitioned me into recognizing that I am just a channel. I'm just a channel. The messages are coming to me, and I am the filter. It filters through my life experience.
It's interesting. It resonates the kind of Plato, the cave analogy when Socrates is going around trying to find truth and who knows truth, and he goes to all these different people who are considered wise, right? And he gets to the poet, and the poet doesn't know truth because they are just kind of a vessel for what, expressing what's coming to them from, I can't remember the exact wording, but they just take in and put out. It doesn't necessarily have defined meaning, at least in the cave analogy, as far as truth or whatever. But that's a really interesting. That's very does the kind of openness mentality come from art, or does it include some of your self-healing? Does that make sense?
It's both.
Okay.
I came from a family, a very dysfunctional family, but my father was a scientist. He was an aircraft engineer.
Whoa.
And he was all about logic.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a lawyer.
Really? That twisted.
But I always I started I was drawing. I would always draw. And guess what I drew?
I'm gonna guess like blueprints if you're hanging or something.
Pictures of rock stars
Nice.
that
Okay.
I love.
Like Mick Jagger.
I have a painting of Mick Jagger that I did in college.
It's supposed to be like life size, right?
Life. Larger than life. Even when I was in college, it's funny because, thinking about, see, this is where the spokes of the wheel they reach out in so many different directions. It's like which direction to go. The question you asked me was, maybe you should repeat it.
Okay. So basically, the idea that the artist is a vessel, right, for the outside world influence. The artist internalizes it and puts it out in some way, or humans. Let's not even label it to just an artist, because to some degree,
absolutely, all humans, if
right.
When they start to open their eyes or start to listen to and pay attention to what's coming at them, they'll realize that they're being spoken to.
Right.
Now, they can ignore it. A lot of people choose to, as we've witnessed this week. But,
yeah.
It's still coming at you. And the thing is, what's happened, and I will use astrology, but what's happened is Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, transformation, and Saturn, the planet of structures, Pluto has decimated the structures that no longer serve us. And so now we're in the process of cleaning up the rubble. And that applies to every single human on this planet. And I do not include the sitting liar in chief in that, because I don't consider it human.
Fair enough. Yeah, that whole but that's bonkers. The whole situation is bonkers. But put a pin in that. We can get back to that later. But I like that. It does make sense, right? Like the pandemic's global, so everyone's working through, like how you said, the rubble, what's been destroyed, and rebuilding, and like it's a beautiful like chance for new things to grow. And it's also sad because like things aren't going to be the same. Everything's going to be different to some degree, and like.
But it's not going to be sad, because Aquarius is it's the essential workers. It's Black Lives Matter. It's everybody is valuable. Everybody has equal value and has something to offer.
100%.
And that's the mentality that we're moving into.
Yeah.
But believe me, the rubble is not going to be cleared away for a number of years. Pluto's going into Aquarius, I think, in 3 years. Okay. And by that point, maybe, the people that have been resisting, that have believed the lies, that never, none of them forgot anything they were promised. But they drank the Kool-Aid and they're still tripping, right?
Yeah.
They're still on the trip. So when they start to realize that, wow, I'm being listened to, I'm being seen, I'm getting what I was told I was going to be given, then they're going to start to see.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to take, because that mentality of person is not someone who's open to truth.
Yeah.
So mired in their dysfunction that they cannot, it's like they're in these cages thrashing around right now, and they don't see that the door is unlocked and they can walk out anytime they want.
It is pretty amazing how like rage or any emotional like overflow makes you miss small details, like the door being unlocked.
Rage is suppressed pain.
Yeah.
I mean, we come from trauma of some sort. Everyone has come from trauma. We wouldn't be on this planet if we hadn't. It's a process. Life is a process. It's a learning process. And if you choose to stop learning and growing, then you may not die physically, but you certainly die mentally and probably emotionally.
No, I definitely agree with that. I think the more you involve yourself into that has a learning curve, and the more uncomfortable you make yourself in situations, the more comfortable you eventually become in being uncomfortable, right? Like you diving into learning Pro Tools, or like that's a whole nother angle of the music spectrum, and like it's a very specific thing. You know what I mean? Like, what's if is this mic in phase? Is it not? Do I care? That's not gonna. It's not gonna. You know, when you're coming into it, yeah, you should care. It makes that sound better, so you can express yourself more and fill in the blank. But like, definitely, I agree that learning in any degree, and it's kind of like I've been on I'm a big fan of Bruce Lee and some of his philosophies. And there's this philosophy or this bit, which his is kind of like a jumble of everything else. Most of his writings are him trying to pick apart other writings, which is cool. You know what I mean? Because you kind of get like an intro to a lot of things. But all knowledge being self-knowledge.
Right.
And like, I was kind of like, but I think that kind of, as far as like learning, the more you learn about how to do anything that you don't know how to do, or about being uncomfortable, eventually is learning yourself and how to make yourself be comfortable or uncomfortable or achieve things.
Well, I think, and I did realize at some point in my art journey, because I did not start out as a musician. I started writing songs out of college, but that was essentially secret. I didn't perform. I had a friend who was in a band that I had gotten close to, and he recorded my song. I have to limit some of the things that I say. I'm very open, but one of the things that I don't want to be an issue at this point, not forever, is my age.
Gotcha.
So I don't want to date myself.
Fair enough.
Even though this band is amazing.
Gotcha.
They were incredible. Like one of the most unbelievable bands that you would ever see. 4 vocalists. People who were around it back then can kind of figure it out. But, he brought me to his apartment and recorded some of my songs on tape. And that was the first time I'd ever been recorded. But it was a good, What
was that experience like, hearing yourself back for the first time?
Well, it was interesting because I hate my speaking voice.
I relate. Just when you hear your own voice, you're like, oh, why am I talking? But anyway.
But I actually like my singing voice. And it's not that I have a great singing voice as far as voice is concerned. It's that I'm so careful with the way that I write my lyrics that it's extremely important to me that when I sing them, that the emotion and the meaning behind them is clear.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very good at phrasing and emoting through the lyrics. That's what I'm good at. It's not that my voice is good. It's that's what I do, because it's not really for me about being the best singer. It's about being a communicator.
Well, I think your voice, you have a really specific tone that I think is very settling within the music you write. Like your voice fits perfectly on the space you make with the band, and I know you write a lot of the parts, but the space within your music, your tone fits very like nicely and shines out of that. And I agree, like you don't want to aim to be the best at anything to some degree, because that's defeating the purpose, right? With music, it's more expressing feelings and what you're in thoughts, and like phrasing is key with that. And like I've been diving into poetry, right? Metered poetry. And it's a weird realm, and everything is lined up in a certain way and certain syllables. So it's like almost like the same thing as far as like phrasing in music like fits with like a note and a tone and a rhythm. Same thing with this metered poetry, and when that lines up, there's like something in the human brain that just makes what's being said stick out more and ring or resonate more deeply with the listener.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'm working on an animated video with this man that's just brilliant, and I was looking. I had a photograph that I wanted him to use as kind of the closing part of the video, and I only had it's the insert for Real Boy where the lyrics are.
Yeah.
And I only had that. So I went on this major search through my house looking for that photograph, and I found everything but that. Like, I found so much stuff. And I found this poem that I had written after I had gone on this round the country trip with this friend of mine that was another crazy genius. Like, that's who I attract, crazy geniuses.
That's who you want to attract, though.
I'm not calling myself a genius. I can certainly be, you can throw me in the crazy box, but I found this poem that I had written about driving into Las Vegas, and that it's the devil's playground. And so I have, like, right in front of me right now, I have two versions of it where I had already made some changes. I'd shortened it.
Yeah.
I don't know which came first. And I'm like, I'm going to make a song out of this. So it's like these treasure, this image of, like, the story of this in the song Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
I found the treasure in this harbor, being an asshole quoting my own lyrics, but from a forgotten map left by that last robber. So it's like I've been finding all these treasures as I've been going through all my old stuff. And it's like, it's Slaughterhouse-Five.
Yeah.
I seem to have come unstuck in time. You go back in time and you pick up where you left off, and you learn and you heal something from the past, and then you zap into the future, and you've got that knowledge with you.
Yeah, that's a good analogy for it too. Vonnegut, man, that is.
Yeah, when I listed all my influences, I don't know if they're up anywhere anymore, but I had totally forgotten about Vonnegut, who was a huge influence on me. Huge. And I don't know why I left him out. Maybe because I was still, climbing out of the cocoon.
Yeah. It's hard when someone asks you that, like, because depending on the tone of the conversation, or if you're doing it for a press thing, or you're more focused on, like, well, musically, I'm promoting the music, so what music, you know what I mean? Like, and it's a combination of all these different factors that fall into whatever art, you're putting out, music or poetry, and like, but it's I don't know. I understand that is a frustrating, like, who's your guys? And you're like, there's so many.
When I started out on social media, which was just July 2019, I was working with a promoter who was controlling things, and
yeah.
The first thing that I noticed was that, and I was in London, so the first thing I noticed was that he was putting up these mood things on my Facebook page, like, Alpha Cat is feeling excited, and I'm like, and it just really grated on me.
Yeah, that's weird.
And the bio just sounded like a brag, and it wasn't even true. So, when I figured out how to take control,
yeah,
I slowly did, because I started saying, first thing was no more emoji, over, those gone, that's over with. And then, and then I started saying, well, I'm writing the posts. You are going to post exactly what I write. And, and certainly it's the promoter, so I take suggestions. It's not that I'm like the dictator. I listen to the people that know what they're doing more than me. But in the end, it's my image, and I want it to be my voice.
True.
So I finally, when I got to the point where I knew how to do it, I changed the bio.
Yeah. What was it? Yeah, it's weird. Like promoters, people that run the media stuff, like, or the social media stuff, they know like what's like gonna hit the algorithm or gonna reach out to certain things or stick out to people, but it doesn't necessarily like convey the artist's intent as purely. I was having a conversation with my new friend, and I believe a friend of yours, Chris Butler. And, he is the coolest. And put a pin in that because I want to ask you about him. But we were talking about like when Tin Huey, his band, got signed. There was Warner Brothers had all this control and did all the press and stuff, and which is cool because it's kind of, you don't have to worry about it. But at the same time, you don't really get to put any say into it until you see it. You're like, well, it's already out now. What's cool about like social media and like the landscape of that now is you have the option to control it. It's a lot to do, and it's a lot to learn, and it's a lot to like keep track of. It's overwhelming, but it's like you can have your vision and who you are out there, and like if who's going to be drawn to that's going to be drawn to that, which is cool because it's all in your hands.
You can't, to quote another Aquarian, Abraham Lincoln, to paraphrase.
Yeah.
You can please some of the people some of the time. You can please all the people. No, you can please some of the people all the time. You can please all of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. So if you're going to be yourself, and particularly if you're unusually minded, as I will try to kindly describe myself. A lot of people aren't going to like that. But then again, people that are drawn to the truth and drawn to authenticity, those are the people I want anyway. And if there's a gray area of people that might, come across my stuff and maybe listen to it and maybe go, wow, I hear something in that. Great. It's not about exclusion. It's about, and the thing is, when I first started with social media, I was very, very specific in my intent to not be in any way biased or divisive, because I felt like, I'm talking about the human experience. I'm not talking about the Republican experience or the black experience or the white experience or the wealthy experience, And I was very, very careful about that. And then the pandemic started. And you may or may not be aware of this, but Kumail Nanjiani had started posting about his wife, about the need for taking precautions, social distancing, masks, etc. And he was getting trolled mercilessly. And he put up this post, and I'm paraphrasing again because I think he took it down. I tried to find it later. He said, my favorite person in the world that lives with me is immune compromised. I am going to post about this until I have 0 followers left. And so that was like my permission to just be unleashed. Yeah. Because, the stakes became too high. Yeah. Was it? And I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
So it's like, you know what? And then it's like, then again, I can't remember who I'm quoting now, but, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. So I decided to take a stand.
No, I think like, I can't remember. If you don't make enemies or whatever, you're not doing it right. Da, 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 da. But I agree with that.
There's so many quotes.
I know, we can go back and forth. But
we've got the gist.
well, and I feel most people that we find, or most people as people find inspiring, stood for something or did something their own way. And like, there's at least in American culture, there's the underdog story that resonates so deeply, and like can empower so many different people in so many different ways. And sticking up for what you believe in and seeing it work out, and or just fully embracing you, like with Kumail. That's I wasn't aware of that story. I enjoy his comedy and his career quite a bit. What was that film he put out with his wife? Side note.
Well, The Big Sick. That's about.
Yeah, it's about them. It's so beautiful.
It's an amazing movie, and it's, he had to overcome, the Pakistani traditional belief that he had to marry a Pakistani woman while he's secretly in love with this blonde wasp.
Yeah.
And, finally she finds out and she dumps him, and the next thing you know, she's in the hospital in a coma and can die.
Yeah.
So he spends time getting to know her parents, and he realizes, fuck my parents' Pakistani values. This is who I love.
Yeah.
This is who I'm going to marry. Period.
And it's so much of life is embracing the situation that's in front of you, and like so much of your perception is diluted by what you think you should do as opposed to what's actually happening. And that's an excellent example of it. And his reaction to the pandemic and with the whole tweet and what you're doing is a perfect example of that too.
Yeah, now they're trolling him because he's in great shape. So,
Get out of here. Look at you all healthy.
Like,
way to take care of yourself.
My arms look like a 90-year-old woman's. I've not been using my arms during this pandemic. So, but on the other hand, I hardly eat because I'm so busy. So I'm like a bag of bones. So, I'm trying to do better and eat better and stuff like that. But, people do what makes them feel the most comfortable. Like that's what they should do.
No,
that's how you have a healthy body and a healthy soul. You feed your soul.
Definitely.
And you feed your body with what nurtures it.
Yeah, you can't do one without the other. Definitely can't do one. One doesn't work. You can't do the things you want to do if you're not if you don't got the strength, the nutritional gas to do it, right?
Yeah.
I imagine so you kind of mentioned, and we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but you're mentioning with the Zoom thing, you do meetings. Did you ever encounter someone who had like a dietary problem? I'm trying to find the right word for it, like a eating disorder of some sort.
Well, not in me. Well, in the meetings that I do, I started with AA. I don't do that anymore because I realized that my problems were they were about my childhood.
Gotcha.
And that, there's a reason why people become addicts to things. It's because they're in pain and they're trying to dull the pain.
Yeah.
And so, it took me about 10 months. And I was very lucky because when I was in London and I was going to this clubhouse that was similar to the one I went to in New York, to AA meetings, they had the ACA meetings up. And I thought one day, I looked at the schedule. I thought, I'll check that out. And they said one phrase, and I was like, holy shit, this is where I belong. And then I slowly transitioned into just doing that.
Yeah.
Because that's really where the problem lied. Or I'm not sure the correct
grammar. I don't think. But it makes sense. It's all kind of this journey of self-knowledge, right? Is learning what's working and what isn't. Did AA like initially kind of help? I know a lot of people are either
What it does is it helps you to, and I was very lucky because I went into a meeting that was very accepting of my eccentricities.
yeah,
And believe me when I say most of them aren't. So I was actually able to be myself. And yet, you know, when I was 3 months sober in London when I found ACA. So I come back to New York and I realized that, you know, and I've already realized after being in, you know, ACA for a while and in AA both at the same time, everyone in AA is an ACA. They all are. You know, and some of them realize it and go to ACA. And ACA is not just alcoholics, it's dysfunctional families. You don't have to have an alcoholic parent. I happen to, but it's dysfunctional families and it's generational. It's passed down. You know, my parents were ACAs, so they passed that down to me. But, you know, you realize that in AA, there are people who, despite having been in AA for decades, are still miserable. Not all of them, but there are enough of them, and they talk about their childhoods, and I would go up to them and say, you know, maybe you might want to check out ACA. You know, as far as I know, none of them did. But, you know, you have these people that, because what happens if you don't heal the core problem is you just shift your addiction from one thing to another. Yeah. So, you know, I know in particular, I'll just use one example, someone who is now addicted to ACA. I'm not ACA, AA. They're addicted to AA. Every day they must go to one or more meetings of AA. Wow. They're miserable. They're stuck. Their creativity is dried up, you know, and yet, you know, must go to AA. And my suggesting that maybe ACA could be helpful never took me up on it. So, you know, I don't know where that person is now. I don't know. I presume he's still unhappy and, you know, wants to be dead like I did when I was in my cocoon. But I don't want to be dead anymore.
Was it? It's interesting with ACA because I've attended a few of those. We've had. I have a family member, and would take my younger sister, and it would be it's an interesting experience. It's different, and like and some. It's weird. Music. So I'm a full-time musician in Cleveland, as well.
What do you play?
I sing and play guitar. Can you relate?
Do you write songs?
Yeah. I play in a band called C Level, letter C dash.
Okay.
I know there's an SEA level. Found that out.
You'll have to send me a link.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would love to hear what you think. But we would go to these meetings, right? And like the idea of just listening and being around people who are attempting to change and like attempting to do something and coming from these different positions and like hearing how they're navigating and like, but anyway, one thing I fell into was doing an open mic night at a sober bar called Not a Bar. And I've spent a lot of time in like the AA community and seeing certain people, and it's interesting what you just said, how valid that is, how some people are like, I mean, all our brains are like, we like patterns, we like things we can predict, right? We like things we know we like. But it's interesting when someone just shifts that to the thing and that lack of kind of like self-growth. For the majority of people I've met within that, in the AA culture, a lot of people, they're blunt. They'll tell you what you need to hear, even if you don't want to hear it, right? So, like, I always appreciate that opinion.
There's value to that. Yeah. But, you know, there's, you know, the motto is progress, not progress, not perfection. But, you know, when you hear the same shit over and over and over again, and nobody's changing their story, nobody's advancing their story, you know, it's kind of like, well, perhaps this has served its purpose for me. time to move on.
Definitely.
Make no mistake. When I got back to New York, and I realized that there was maybe one ACA meeting a day, while there are thousands of AA, NA, OA, all those.
Yeah.
It's like, what in the hell? And my sponsor at the time helped me start my own ACA meeting.
That's awesome.
And so ACA meetings are different too, because there's this rule called no crosstalk. And it exists because of the fact that, and what it means is, you're not supposed to interrupt or comment on someone else's share. But the problem with that is that somebody can be telling the story about how their father raped them and they have children that they don't know whether they're their fathers or they're one of their many lovers, because of course they had many lovers because they were raped by their father from the age of 9. And they're crying, sobbing, and you're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to comfort them. You're not allowed to touch them. So, during the pandemic, when we shifted to Zoom, this meeting changed a lot.
Yeah.
My meeting. And now we do what we call positive crosstalk, which means that you do ask the person if you can comment on their share, and then you give them insights that they triggered in you, and you support them.
Yeah.
So that they're not in this position of like pouring out this nightmare story and sobbing and just sitting with it, being ignored.
Yeah.
They're actually like, it's a dialogue. It's more like what they call after the meetings, the fellowship, where you go hang out.
Yeah.
My meeting is like fellowship. It's largely fellowship in that sense, because, again, I'm an Aquarius, so I had to do it different.
That's
because I had to make sure that everybody knew they were seen and heard.
Yeah, that's what. You want to be heard, you want to be reflective, and it's hard to do that to yourself, especially if you're dealing with trauma and like your reality is shaken and like you can't necessarily discern what is and what isn't. Having someone hear what you just said and be like, I'm with you, I understand that's horrible, or even some type of insight if someone's in like some loop of denial, right? Like it's important to have that positive feedback. So I think that's a really badass like adaptation to it.
Well, it's interesting because I'm an Aquarius and I'm into all the tarot, I'm into all the astrology and the I Ching and everything. And I did not come by that, from my brain. I came by that from people introducing me to things and having my mind blown. Yeah. And realizing that, there was more to just there was more than just my brain operating here. So we now alternate. We do every other week we do what we now call an oracle meeting, which basically what we do is one person who has the book just opens it to whatever page it falls to and reads from there. And it's always perfect.
That's always crazy. Perfect. That's crazy. Like in a good way. I don't mean like crazy in like a negative connotation. I know it has a negative, but I mean that's I don't know, serendipical. That's so cool. Like how when something just resonates and you're like, out of perchance, I get such like a excitement spike, a dopamine spike when that happens. Like, no way, that's so cool.
But the more you open to it, the more often it will happen.
Yeah. Wow, that's a is that The book that is this, what is the book?
Well, we used the big red book.
The big red book? Okay.
Try doing an I Ching reading one time, and it was a little early. People were not quite ready for it.
Yeah, because that's supposed to be super precise.
Even though the one that we got was Revolution, so it was like by allowing this to happen, this is a revolution. It was so perfect. But we did do a fun thing. I think it was New Year's Day, because I also started following this woman who does spirit animal totems. Because, I started looking at the kind of animals that would show up in my yard and look, and flowers and whatever. And like anything that I would notice, I would look up its meaning, just Google what is the symbolic meaning of this. And it was always perfect. So on 6 months into this, on Christmas, no, maybe it was New Year's. It was either Christmas Day or New Year's Day. I said, somebody suggested we have a meeting, and then I was like, well, maybe we could just hang out. And then I said, what we could do? We could pull a spirit animal card. And everybody was like, oh, that'd be really cool. And of course it was perfect. And everybody loved it. And that was like our hang on Christmas Day. That's cool. I think it was Christmas Day.
That's cool. That's like, what did you do? What animals? It sounds like we did. What has come across your way that has, like, recently, like with that reading or the Christmas Day one, you were pulling a card and observing that, right? It wasn't like just checking out the landscape and seeing what's by.
Yeah, no, I pulled a card.
Gotcha. What was it?
I don't remember.
It's crazy.
I don't remember. Because I pull cards for people a lot now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting though.
I can't keep track. I'm doing so much, and I do actually have to hire people now to help me with stuff. I have to hire someone for social media now because it's just so overwhelming, everything that I'm doing. I just started the label. I just signed my first artist this week.
Can you say who? It's okay if you can't.
Yeah, I think I can say who. It's a rapper named L Boogs, and he lives in France.
Okay. Wow, that's a reach. That's like.
Yeah, well, that was another, like, God bless the broken road that led me back straight to you kind of thing.
Yeah.
The first person that I agreed to sign was someone that when I got to London on July 2nd, 2019, it happened to be a Wednesday, the day the Time Out came out.
Yeah. So
what I would always do is I'd go through the entire thing and underline, circle, schedule everything that I wanted to do. And there happened to be a poetry slam that night. And I've never been to a poetry slam. I didn't even know what a poetry slam was.
Yeah.
And I was jet lagged. Maybe I got a nap. I don't remember. But I set off on this quest to find this poetry slam. And it was an hour walk to get to, I'm using Google Maps, and of course Google Maps, you're standing still and the arrow is just spinning like, your head.
Yeah. Because
you don't know where the fuck you are, and Google's not helping you by giving you a spinning arrow, right?
Which way?
I finally get to the place, and they're like, well, we're sold out. And I'm like, shit, I just walked an hour. And then a girl comes out and she's like, oh, I'm leaving, you can have my spot. So then I'm like, yay.
Nice.
And then I go in and they're like, well, the poetry slam isn't here. It's canceled. So then I go online on my phone and I see that it's not been canceled, it's been moved. So then I go through this whole other process of trying to find it, which involved getting lost a lot and watching the Google Maps era spin a lot
That sounds
and ask
frustrating.
directions, and so I finally get there, and I'm this not young woman sitting alone outside smoking cigarettes and drinking ginger ale, and one of the guys comes up to me and asks me to be a judge. And I'm like, well, I really would rather not, and he's, please, please, please. And I'm like, why did you pick me? And he said, well, it seems apparent that you don't know anyone here. So
That makes sense. You'd be the fairest judge because
right.
not buy it in.
No idea that I was a songwriter, that I do words for a living. Well, not for a living, but I've done word. That's my thing.
Yeah.
Word. Nobody knew that, but he finally convinced me, and I get behind this. It's a small pub, and I get behind the judge's table, quote unquote, with these other people, and we had the cards that flip up, and 6.9 or whatever. Okay. And there was this one young man that was just brilliant, and I thought he should win. He came in second, but, I went up to him afterward and I said, I'd really like to post about you on my social media. And he, now I know him quite well, and I know why he acted the way he acted, but he was essentially frightened of me.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into the personal reasons, but, he basically, all he had at that point was an Instagram. And when I went back to the promoter I was using at the time, it was not easy to find. But I did end up posting about him. And then he thanked me over Instagram. And so we started we started a communication that eventually became a dialogue that eventually got to the point where he asked me a question, and I said, this is a conversation. This is not a DM situation anymore. This is a conversation. And, why don't we speak over Zoom? And the first time we spoke over Zoom, and pretty much every time we talk over Zoom, and he's in London and I'm in New York, it's 3 hours.
That's awesome.
And, he happens to be from Ghana. He's from Africa. He grew up in London from the time he was, I think, 3 or 5. And he's a performing poet, and he's brilliant. And, so when I decided to start this label, he's the first person that I asked to be on the label. But he hasn't signed yet because his process, he's got a fire under him in London. He's doing a lot of stuff. And so what I'm going to serve as his introduction in the US. And the international promoters that I found actually work. But so, all the stuff that I've learned ever since July 2019, and when I say that the pace has quickened since the beginning of the pandemic, I couldn't make a greater understatement. But, I've been in the music business a long time, and I do know, and I've taken a lot of business course, seminars, been to South by, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I had to catch up because I hadn't put out a record since 2002, but, the bare bones of it remained the same. It's just the method of transmission has changed. And because I'm an Aquarius, it's not hard for me to adapt to that. But it's still a lot of learning. It's a big learning curve.
For sure.
And, if you had told me, even when I was putting out Thatched Roof, that I was going to start a label and start signing artists, I would have said you were crazy. Like, I never would have imagined. It's like stuff that I in my wildest dreams, never would have imagined that I would be doing.
It's a definitely a whole different perspective on the music game, really, or music career, because now you're kind of acting as a captain for all these other acts in this new sea, which is in this case America. But like, that's what's the name of the label?
Aquamarine, and I named it Aquamarine when I did the designs for Pearl Harbor.
Okay, when you're
not really knowing what the symbolism was. And then when I decided to actually start the business, I looked at the meaning of aquamarine and I was like, holy shit. And even like a week ago, or maybe a week and a half ago, when I spoke to this young poet, we went through it again, and I was blown away again, because the meaning is so perfect to what my intent is for what this label should be, what I want it to be.
What's the meaning? What is it?
Well, I mean, I could pull up my page and read it. It's a page long. I mean, let me see if I can pull it up and just give you a couple highlights. I actually have so many pages and documents open on this laptop that you would think that I was completely insane if you just looked at it and you didn't know me.
I don't know. My laptop's kind of the same way.
I don't even know what I just opened. I was trying to figure out how to post to Instagram from my laptop, and that didn't work.
There's a trick to it.
I mean, I got 2 different Google instructions, and the first one didn't work, and then I didn't have time for the second because I had to eat.
Yeah.
But here, I can pull something up here. See what comes up, how to post on Instagram from laptop. Okay, this one I can change.
It should be way easier. I don't know why that program, for as big of a platform as it's become, why the desktop version of Instagram is so, why you have to go into the settings of your computer to change it to be able to use it.
It's ridiculous, because I mean, I spend a lot of time like writing these posts.
Yeah.
You know, I edit them. They have to represent me in every way that my beliefs. And, you know, I can, in the other platforms, I can just copy and paste. But Instagram, I have to voice dictate, and that's a nightmare because it doesn't say what you're saying. It says what it thinks you say.
Exactly. So it's all jumbled. And you're like, what are you talking about?
Well, I just pulled it up. First of all, aquamarine is the stone of courage, personal development. The stone of the sea enables us to access our deep inner wisdom. This, in turn, empowers us to remain true to our deepest values, expressing our feelings openly and communicating with others from the heart. That's just the first couple lines. And it jumps down aquamarine spiritual energy. Aquamarine is a stone of empowerment for men and women alike. It helps the realization that not all power comes from force. There is also power in aligning with the yielding, resilient vitality of life and in promoting truthful and compassionate communication. It lends women the courage to express their inner knowing and enhances their intuitive abilities, and it helps dispel the emotional numbness and difficulty men sometimes experience in communicating their feelings. And this is a long, it's not that long a page, but there's 5 paragraphs on it. So, you know.
I think that.
But, you know, when I named it that, it wasn't like I knew what it meant. You know, I just I like this. I'm an Aquarius. I like the color. And looked cool. You know, I found a font. It looked cool. It was the same with naming Alpha Cat.
Yeah.
You know, I named it Alpha Cat. I was originally, it was Meerkat.
I was about to ask you about the meerkats, but
simply the meerkat, and you know the symbolism of the meerkat is, in short, that of community. So
Yeah.
it wasn't that it was not. It wasn't that it was off.
interesting. Yeah.
But when I was designing the cover for Real Boy, and I was trying to use this meerkat picture that I had taken that I loved, it just wasn't sitting right. And I ended up, you know, it's called Real Boy, and there's a song on it called, you know, A Real Boy. And so I ended up using one of my photographs that was black and white, and I had hand colored the boy in the center so that he was real and the rest of everything around him was not real. And I remembered my sister had been talking about the alpha dog concept, and of course I'm a cat person, and I love dogs, but I am a cat person. So I thought Alpha Cat, and I found the font, and it looked great, and so I used that, and then Your Real Boy came out. It's all over the charts, and I don't have a band, so I have to put this ad out. I have to put this band together, and it ends up being 3 women and 2 men. So
it's a community.
Okay, Alpha, like feminine leads the masculine. You know, the intuitive, emotional side leads the creative side. The masculine, it's yin yang. They need each other. We each have, you know, that's why the gender roles have become so permeable, because that's another aspect of this recognition of the yin yang within all of us, right?
Yeah, that they are each other. It's not, it's not 2 different things. It's one thing with different things that can't function without itself.
And it's funny because when I was digging through stuff yesterday, I found some contact sheets of an installation I did in this gallery down in Soho after I got my master's degree, called Estrogen Testosterone, and I collaborated with this man, and what my idea was and what we executed was that I went out and I bought 2 pairs of men's combat boots. Obviously, my size and his size.
Yeah.
2 pairs of black women's panties, you know, bikini panties. 2 pairs of white Hanes tighty whities. And I'm trying to think. Yeah, and 2 pairs of women's black pumps. And so I photographed, we both of us wore every permutation. So I photographed each of us from right above the navel down.
Yeah.
So that basically people could not tell. It was confusing to people that, you know, you couldn't be sure
who was who,
whether it was a man or a woman. And they were life size. They were in pairs. They stood up, like a L shape.
Yeah.
And they were paired, you know, in a very pointed way. And they were in the center of this room that was about gender. And this was probably 91, 92. And people loved it. You know, there were people, I have photographs of people. They love to stand behind them and have their pictures taken.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's a beautiful way to portray that like gender fluidity or the non understanding of, you know, the confusion that can come from these like standard definitions. So when you went to college, you were at that same time, right? You were working as a professional photographer, or was it post?
Technically, I guess, but you know, when I had the reading yesterday with the astrologer, she said, "Well, you've always been able to make a living off your art," and I was like, "Well, no." I always had to work other jobs, and you know, yes, I was published. When I was digging through shit yesterday, I found a bunch of my tear sheets, but and I worked fairly steadily as a photographer, but I never made a living at it. Not even approaching it.
Because you did a lot of like portraits for bands, right?
I did a lot of band portraits. I did a lot of other stuff too, though. There were really two sides to my work.
Well, no, like
because there was the portraits side, which a lot of them were bands. But when I was in Atlanta, I photographed a lot of different people, not just bands. I was out every night photographing bands, but I was also photographing other people for what was then Creative Loafing. It was like the Village Voice of Atlanta. I don't know if it even still exists, but I was also doing what you know you could loosely term street photography.
Gotcha. So kind of just like life on the street, catching stuff as it goes.
But again, it was like something that I recognized, I guess, early on. I don't know if you've heard of the Henri Cartier-Bresson concept of the decisive moment.
No, I'm not familiar with that. So is that okay? Run it by me. It sounds sick. That sounds awesome.
It's a photograph that is an archetype. So the concept is that you capture this thing at the decisive moment, and a lot of my photographs were that they were like archetypes, and I mean, when I say I was crazy with it, like I had my camera on me every waking minute. I was photographing while I was driving. You know, I was obsessed. You know, what if I miss something? What if I miss something? And the obsession grew to the point where I got an automatic camera because it's like then I'll miss less stuff if I have an automatic camera, right?
Yeah.
And then at one point I was just like, what are you doing? Like, you can't be there for every single moment. And I calmed down, but I had also recognized that these things that my camera was capturing, if I had seen them and decided to take a photograph of them, they would have been over.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't my brain that was taking the pictures. It was my intuition. Because I was knowing on some level that something was going to happen before it happened, and I just snapped the shutter at the moment it happened, not knowing really what I was doing or what I was getting until I went back and looked at the contact sheets.
That's interesting. I feel like a lot of art is kind of that way, though. It's in the moment, like when you're improvising on whatever. And it's more of the analyzing it, looking back, where you really can see that in this case, moment of transcendence or moment of importance that you randomly captured because you knew something, like your intuition was saying something was going to happen there, and then looking back, you're like, was it there? Was it there? That's an interesting concept. I'll have to dive more into it.
But, you know, of course, all of this was unconscious at that point. wasn't conscious of it until I took this trip around the country. And when I say I was photographing while I was driving, I'm not kidding. Like, I'm driving the car and I'm taking pictures while I'm driving the car. And then I come back and I get this spread in the Boston Phoenix, and I have to put together all these images. And I see, as I did them, as I put them together, that these are not things that I knew what I was doing when I took them. It had to be intuition.
That's beautiful. I don't know. There's something really cool about that, about just it happening and being the vessel that captures it or expresses it. When it comes to like taking a portrait, what do you look for?
I look for the person's soul. I look for when they're real. And I'm gonna get hate mail and hate emails and stuff from this, but I've always really been very angry about the lionization of Annie Leibovitz, because to me, she gets a lot of money and she creates, or whoever creates these amazing sets around these people. But as far as capturing someone's essence, maybe I've seen it twice, and as long as I've seen her photography, she doesn't do that. That's not what she does. She puts them in a setting that costs a lot of money to put together, and then she just takes a picture, and you get a picture of the person, but you don't get a picture of who they are. You get a picture of what they look like.
In an environment that allows them to shine. That's interesting. That's
the environment that they create. Yes, that's symbolic of who they are, where they want perceived, but the actual image of them has nothing to do with who they are.
I think it's beautifully, at least as far as like looking for what you're looking for in a portrait. I think that was beautifully said, because like it's always like those pictures of someone in the spur of the moment, not knowing almost they're being photographed, when you really get a sense of who this person is.
You have to learn how to manipulate people too.
Sure. You gotta, just like when you record music, you gotta feel comfortable
and to get into being unguarded.
Yeah. It's strange, like it's such a human thing that we want to be. We want to capture what we do to some degree, but when that red light clicks on and you're being recorded, everyone gets somewhat shy somehow, in some way. They're not as natural as when they were a second ago. So there has to be some setup work to the environment to, to like engage in that authentic. I can't talk today. Authentic like behavior and thought process. Wow.
Well, it's funny because it works different ways for different songs, and most of my songs are metaphors that are taken from actual events from my life. Like when in the song Monsters, when I say every day your bed's in a different place, but the monsters always find you.
Yeah.
I was seeing a guy who lived in Williamsburg. I was in Jersey City, and he was in a loft, and literally every time I went over there, his bed was in a different place. He had moved his bed. He moved his bed every single time I went over there. So, like, a lot of it is that. But then a song like Pearl Harbor, which there's a whole story about how that came about, and I'm not going to go through it other than to say that the music, and this is the only time I've ever written a song this way, I wrote all the music. I had all it completely arranged and memorized 2 years before I had the lyrics, because the events that were to inspire the lyrics had not yet happened.
That is a That is weird, right? Like, so I typically find like the spur of the moment, you know what I mean? Like a thing that inspires you, a phrase in your head eventually attaches to a melody, and you have to find it, you build it up like with the thought of whatever the song may be about.
Well, that's a lot too. That's a lot of it too. You know, you wake up with a phrase in your head.
Yeah. And it's interesting that that song in particular was one that like was fully done except for what it was going to say. But that's a beautiful song, and I think it probably needed that space from when the music was created to when the lyrics became written or became finalized for what they were going to be.
Well, literally, things happened.
Yeah.
That, you know, some devastating things to me that had to happen before I had the language to write the lyrics. It's
like the Joe Strummer input-output theory. You can only put out what you take in.
Yeah.
And I think on a side note, now it's made songwriting and writing a little bit more difficult for some people who can't experience as much to put out because we're in one spot. But then that's not true in the same way, because we're experiencing all this. We're doing this conversation or whatever. You're as busy as maybe more busy than maybe you were before the pandemic. So like, I think I just circled my own thought. But
well, I mean that's the thing. Like, you know, you can be sitting in one room, but you know, your brain doesn't stop.
True.
You know, you're not, unless you're actually physically dead.
Yeah.
You're learning something, or you're unconscious. You know, either metaphysically or literally.
Yeah.
You're learning something.
So, to kind of shift gears completely, how do you know Chris? Mr. Chris Butler? How'd you guys cross paths?
I met Chris, Jim Mastro, who I had photographed when he was in the Bongos.
Oh, okay. So you were...
I lived in Atlanta, and I was photographing bands pretty much every night.
Okay.
I had started... I had been through a marriage and then a relationship that was a very painful breakup. And I kept going, and I kept recording my demos on my 4-track cassette.
Yeah.
And I just ran into Mastro on the street in Hoboken. I was over there for some reason, and he had started this guitar store. And I started going there, and I took some guitar lessons, and I'd buy strings and picks, and Butler used to hang out there because he lived in Hoboken. And we just ran into each other one day, and I think I gave him a copy of Real Boy, and he really liked the song Ground Rush. But we didn't get close until television got back together. They were asked to play I think it might have been the first All Tomorrow's parties out in England. And I could be wrong about that. But so I'm like, well, I'll book a gig in London, and then, you know, we'll go to All Tomorrow's parties, and then I'll have this gig the next day. And so we went to All Tomorrow's parties, and I brought Derek, my co-singer, with me. And we went there, and that in itself was pretty interesting, the whole thing. But, you know, we only have so much time. And then I played at this club called the 12 Bar. That's the only place I ever played in London, but I played there a number of times. The booker there was a huge fan of mine, of my writing, and the way the room is set up is it's very tiny, and there's a stage which is maybe 4 feet off of the ground in the small room, and then there's like a balcony. Where the people are in the balcony are looking down at the top of your head. And so Derek and I did a song or two, and I think Fred had mixed the instrumentals. We had a CD player, And so we had the mixes without vocals and without acoustic guitar. So we had the full band mixes, but I was playing live acoustic and Derek and I were singing live. And we did one or two songs, and then I hear Alpha Cat from the balcony, and it's Butler. And
awesome.
and I was like, is that Butler? I mean, and when I say this is like the size of people's living rooms that don't have large living rooms. So I was like, is that Butler? And he's like, yes, Alpha Cat. So then after that, we ended up hanging out with the club booker, Andy Lowe, and there were some other people that liked what we did a lot, and we ended up hanging out, and one of them was a girlfriend of another famous punk band guy that I'm not going to mention because I don't even remember the name of the band now. But we all went out to an after hours club, and Butler came, and so that's how we really got to know each other.
That's awesome. He's such a cool creative guy who's like immersed in the Akron scene here in Ohio, and like especially with this pandemic has been going out and like making sure venues and even like DIY venues can pay their bills and stuff, finding ways to keep everything open.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him. I talked to him. I've spoken to him during the pandemic, but I haven't spoken to him in a while.
What was it? I did a podcast with him. It's going to come out in like 2 weeks or something from this week. But yeah, super cool guy. That's so with Hoboken, like you said you were checking out the episode with Glenn. Do you guys cross paths, you and Glenn?
Well, it's funny because back in 99 or maybe 2000 after Real Boy took off, I thought I'd like to be on a label.
Oh, okay. Bar none.
And I thought, I even then I wanted, I guess I felt like my chances of being on an indie label were greater than being on a major label. And that was before I was aware of how basically major labels just fuck you up the ass. That's why I started my label, which does it in a completely different, doesn't fuck you up the ass in a completely different way. The whole model of how the label works is different. And the main point of it is that the artist gets to own their masters.
Which is a big deal.
So, obviously there's contracts and there are things. If I have to pay for certain things, then I have to get paid back before they get the masters. But, it's as much DIY as possible. What they can pay for, great. What I pay for, I just need to get paid back. And then the masters are theirs. That's it.
Yeah.
But, so Glenn Morrow, at that point, I was on nearly 100 top 5 charts around the country, on CMJ. I was in the national charts, and I approached Glenn Morrow, and he was not interested. And I spoke to him a few times. But he wasn't into it. So, that's pretty much it with him.
Gotcha. Did you, were you around the Hoboken scene? Because I think you guys were going to rehearse there at one point, right? With the Meerkats or going into the Alpha Cat?
Well, the band before the actual Alpha Cat band was comprised of someone that I had met from Boston, and my guitar teacher from Jim's store that I became very close to. And then he found us a drummer. And I believe those were the people that were on Real Boy. But they weren't really a band. They were just people that gigged out with me occasionally. And now I've forgotten what the question was.
Were you around that Hoboken scene?
Well, I mean, yes, I'd go to I'd go to the shows, and I went to Maxwell's all the time, and Um, yeah. I mean, and that's another thing. Like the guy that ran Maxwell's, and I forget his name now too, but he was very resistant to booking me. And eventually we did play Maxwell's, but it was toward the end.
Yeah. Well, I think that would make sense with when the Real Boy came out in the 90s. So that's probably around the scene was changing around then, as far as in the Hoboken realm of things. But that was it's not far from New York, which so you've been kind of coast to coast here, living in New York, going out to LA. Then when did you go to London? You said 2005, 2002.
I went to London since I was 17 because I know that I lived a lot of lives there. So I've always felt more at home in England than I ever have in the United States.
Interesting.
So I basically I went whenever I could until my breakdown, and then I didn't go. And then after I got sober and I had a few good months under my belt and I knew I was going to put a record out, I was like, I'm going to treat myself and go to London. So I did, and then I met Jamal, this poet, who was going to be on my label.
Gotcha. What slam poetry, kind of to touch upon that, the first slam poet I saw was Saul Williams at Riot Fest, and that's a game changer. I don't know, that got me down the poetry rabbit hole way more than I think I would have gotten down it had not seen it performed like that.
Yeah, I mean, when I say that I know nothing about the poetry world, I'm not kidding. Like, what I know I've learned from Jamal. And I did go to one. He did a slam last week that I watched over Zoom, and he won, as I knew he would. But what I can do is I can spot talent. And I knew that this was a special talent when I saw him. I just knew.
That's all. Well, I can't wait to. You have to send me a link. I'd love to check it out.
Yeah, he's in the process of. Well, he has videos up on YouTube, but they're under two different. They're under his real name and his stage name.
Gotcha.
And so the process now is
putting them together.
Yeah, we got to consolidate them. Get everything underneath the stage name.
Yeah, an actual profile.
But, I can tell you his name. It's he goes by Kid and Nancy. It's Kid as in kid.
Oh, interesting. Kid and Nancy. That's a fun play on.
ANANISI, I think.
Whoa.
And he told me where he got that, and of course I've forgotten because my brain is too full. But that
really
was
so much RAM. I feel it. Right,
it's true. I need an external hard drive for my brain.
I feel that. I can definitely relate to it.
I mean, I'm sure my thoughts are already stored in the cloud anyway.
Well, that's kind of an interesting analogy to what we started our conversation with, right? Like the idea of the cloud and downloading stuff when intuition strikes, it needs it to be there. That's kind of a
brilliant connection. You just made.
Weird.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Now, oh man, now I gotta. That's cool. On a side, completely side spinning. You mentioned television, that you guys went out to go see them in London before playing the 12 Club. Now he helped Fred Smith from Television. He played bass on the record for Real Boy for the first EP.
No, he did not.
He did not. Did he just play with you?
He produced.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Was it guitar then? Because it was Chris. Chris played bass.
No, he did not.
Oh man.
Nope. He keeps saying, "Didn't I play bass on that?" And I'm like, "Sorry, honey, no." He played live with me. I have a thing up on my website where I was selling a live show for mental health charities.
Oh, okay, which is awesome.
Which I'm going to shame people. Very few people bought.
Yeah.
And hopefully all goes to mental health helping people with, that have, difficulty finding access to mental health care. And, this was into the pandemic, and I had discovered this recording. And so Cosmo mastered it. And, he took it from, I guess it was on a DVD, I think. I'm not sure.
Where was it at?
I don't know what form it was in. Whatever it was, he brought it into Pro Tools and he mastered it. And he cut it up into tracks. And it was the first show that I did after my father died, which was a very huge, huge blow and loss for me. And it took me 2 years to get back to where I could play, that I could perform again. And when I tell you, when I picked up the guitar and tried to sing again, it was not easy, and there were lots and lots of tears.
Yeah.
But I somehow fought through, and I got ready, and I did that gig.
Now, is that what you meant by your bio says you lost your voice? Was that?
No, that was after going out to LA to record Being a Smile. Yeah.
But that was it like actually losing your voice, or was it like kind of the drive to do it, or the ability to? Does that make sense?
Well, what really happened was there were two things that were going on. One was that I had a relationship which was very unconventional, I suppose, Aquarian, because it was largely over the phone. I met him in LA the day after I did a gig at the Mint for this compilation record that I was on. And I had met through this other amazing guitar player, Ann Klein, who's in New York, this drummer, Jason Smith, and we just clicked. And so whenever I would go to LA to do a gig, Jason would just get a band for me, and we'd rehearse once, and we'd do the gig, and that's what we did at the end. And I felt like I was like back, I'm back, baby. I was on top of the world. And the next night, I went out with my friend to this club to see a band, and met this man in a way that seemed fated and magical, and ended up being, one of the straws that broke the camel's back. Now I know there was a lot more going on. At the time, I thought it was about him, but it really wasn't. I mean, I suspected it also had to do with the loss of my father, but, I really didn't understand what was really deep down at the root of it all. But, so after a nightmare scenario when this drummer, and when, the joke about the drummer that doesn't have a girlfriend being homeless. Yeah.
Was that the truth?
Wasn't actually homeless, but he did live in a storage space in LA. A storage space.
That's
no
rough,
bathroom,
but
no sink. Not technically homeless.
Yeah.
But pretty much. Right? I mean, he was on tour a lot, so
so that makes sense.
That was one thing, but so part of me, a part of me that I was in denial about went to LA because I hadn't let go of him.
Gotcha.
And but a big part of me really wanted to make a record because I had songs and I wanted to work with Jason Smith. And so, I went to LA. I packed up I got a U-Haul. I had a brand new car. I packed up the U-Haul, same car I have today, by the way. Packed up a U-Haul in the ice, Pro Tools rig, 4 guitars, desks, stuff like that, to go move into what was really just a sliver of a studio apartment that was in the Hollywood Hills, and 2 cats. And
they had to love that ride.
drove to LA. Well, they were allowed to roam the car because, of course, if
Yeah,
you're
you
driving,
can't keep them
if
locked
you're
up.
driving 10 hours a day with cats, they've got to be able to use the litter box, and they were
Yeah.
very good because they prefer to be in the boxes.
Yeah,
They
no.
just, but my original alpha cat, Billy, whose photo and voice are on Pearl Harbor, he used to ride with me in the car, and he would be in my lap with his paws on the window looking out the window.
Aw. That's awesome. My cats are terrified of the car.
My cat Billy, because my dad used to be an aircraft engineer,
Yeah.
always had a small plane. He owned a small plane with another guy that he worked with. And we used to fly to Michigan to our summer house. And I would always bring my cats or
Yeah.
cat. I think Billy was the one cat where when I first had just one cat. Now I'm in the air and the spare phase. I've been in the air and the spare phase for a while now. But
Yeah.
Billy and I got my dad's small plane, and Billy's in my lap,
Aw.
and we're taxiing down the runway. And then we start to lift off, and Billy's, he's in my lap with his paws at the window, and we're starting to take off. And he turns around and looks at me, and I swear to God, he was like, "Mommy, I like to be high, but this is too much." Like, he was like, he's like, "I don't know what this is. This is too high." And then he got used to it, and he was fine. But anyway,
wild.
so back to the losing of the voice.
Yeah.
I started not being able to execute vocals the way I wanted to, and I'd written songs that physically I could sing, but emotionally I wasn't able to sing yet.
Yeah.
Like when I did a demo of one of the songs, I was able to sing it, but then when I was in LA, I started realizing very quickly that I was having trouble hitting those notes. And I started doing vocal coaching, and it was comprised mostly of me trying to sing and crying. And when I say that I don't remember recording the 7 vocals that are on Thatched Roof, I don't remember recording them.
Yeah.
I still don't remember recording them. As far as I knew, I didn't get any good takes. But I do remember a song called Wichita, and being in the studio and trying to get a take, and they just sucked and they sucked and they sucked, and I just broke down crying. And I know it sounds like I cry all the time, but I broke down crying and I gave up, and I went back to my studio apartment, and I just lay in bed and cried and read Agatha Christie books like every waking hour. And my 2 cats that were with me, one of them, Joey, was very sensitive to my emotional state. So he started peeing at the doorway first. And then one day I think I went out for groceries, and I came back and I got into bed that night, and it was wet. And I was like, "God damn it, Joey," and I took the covers off because there was no way I was up for changing sheets.
Yeah.
And then there was shit in the bed. No, first there was shit. And I was like, "Fuck you, Joey." I took the shit off, and I got in bed, and it was wet. He had pissed in the bed, and I was like, "That's it." And I took him to the vet, and I left him there until my sister came and got me.
Gotcha. Just to be able to heal without worrying about whatever the cat's going through.
I was. It was bad enough without having to get in bed that's filled with piss and shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, when one of the cats are distraught, you're distraught because of the cat being distraught, like, and it's but
I know that cat loved me
Yeah.
more than anything. He found me. He's the only cat that found me. But he was a difficult cat because he did act out a lot.
yeah.
And I have a lot of guilt about him because when he was older and I was still in my dysfunction, you know,
Yeah.
and all I could do when I was awake was read trash magazines. You know, he would
Yeah.
get on my lap, he would get on my chest, and I would push him away.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he died 1 month short, 1 month short, 21 years old. That's how long he stayed with me.
Wow.
And he found me.
Yeah. That's
He
amazing.
found me. And, you know, even to this day now, I feel guilt about that because I realized that he was just trying to show me love because he knew he wasn't going to be around that much longer. And I wasn't capable of recognizing that at the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, overall, you know, you were there, you took him in, you guys went on this journey together. So even if at the end there was certain things you could have, you know, should have, would have, the overall picture was he found his forever home with you. And
Well, he, you know, he was taken care of, and I loved him as much as I could, but he was always difficult.
Yeah. It's weird because, like, I don't know, when the cat decides it's time for you to appreciate me, and they take over the chest or the lap, and they're just sitting there and purring, and you're like, all right, well, I guess I gotta appreciate this because, you know, it doesn't always happen. It's a you are begifted time with me, human. Like,
Well,
in a good way.
It happened with him. It happened every single time.
Yeah.
So that's, and I didn't.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
I didn't have the patience.
Yeah,
I didn't have the capacity, you know, to recognize that this was what was happening.
Yeah. How's Kanye cat? You had a cat who had a jaw his jaw was wired shut.
Please do not call him Kanye.
That's what happened to Kanye, though. He had his jaw wired shut.
Nothing. He has absolutely no resemblance to Kanye.
Okay.
Any way, other than
Perseverance with the jaw.
well, yeah. I mean, I didn't even know about Kanye's jaw.
Okay.
I can't. I missed the good Kanye years, and all I know of Kanye is Kanye the asshole years, and Kanye refuses to take medication and thinks that it's okay to be president of the United States when you're bipolar and you don't take your meds.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, buying your wife 5 identical Maybachs for a Christmas present when you're on the brink of divorce, like. Okay, do you think one might have been enough? You know?
Definitely. Like, I don't know. I don't follow Kanye's madness too much because, like, it's kind of like to some degree, like, I don't know, when he talks, he'll say certain things that really, like, there's this arrogance to it, like this ego, but there'll be like these golden nuggets of like, that's an interesting thought process, but it's kind of surrounded by a lot of confusion.
Well, he's confused the fact that he's a channel with the fact that I think he literally thinks that he's the source.
Yeah.
I think he realizes he's a channel whenever something good comes out, and I have not been witness to any of that.
Yeah.
And you know, when I became aware of Kanye, he was already an asshole. So
gotcha. That's how you
know, I didn't have a lot of, and the things that came out that I was aware of with him musically, I thought were lame. So, you know, that's just my impression.
Yeah.
And I do keep up with pop culture because, and I try to explain it, like when I first started reading trash magazines was when my father died, and we had to spend a week in Tennessee waiting for the funeral, and I didn't really drink. So what am I going to do? You know, I couldn't read anything heavy. So I started reading trash magazines.
Yeah.
But what I've realized, you know, I had to justify this to a number of people, including Jamal, but it's like, it's how I know what's going on. I know what people are thinking about.
Yeah.
because that's what that tells me. You know, I watch TMZ, I watch Stephen Colbert, I watch Trevor Noah, I watch Seth Meyers. If I could watch Jimmy Kimmel, if my DVR, I love Jimmy Kimmel, and if my DVR would allow me to record more than 2 programs at once, I would be watching more Jimmy Kimmel. But
Yeah.
that's how I get my news. And then the snippets that when I turn the TV on, you know, are just happen to be there.
It's an interesting way to kind of take in sociological like norms and because of those, like with like how you were calling trash magazines, like those are an open, appealing thing, right? So a lot of those have been selling forever, and they're probably never going to stop, or they're going to find a new medium. But that it hits a large audience, so much so that they still prevail. So falling in, analyzing that, especially for trying to run a label and figuring out how to reach people and stuff, is a interesting approach to it.
Yeah, for me, it's not even. For me, it's not even so much about trying to reach people. It's about them reaching me.
Oh, okay. All right. You know, I can see that too.
I garner
inverse of it.
Of my topics for my social media posts from things that I become aware of with these magazines, because of course there's reviews of movies and music and stuff, like the TV shows and stuff like that. And even though I really have very little time to watch anything.
Yeah.
I do, you know, and I rely on the algorithms for YouTube because they show me stuff that I wouldn't have been aware of otherwise.
Yeah, no, they're good. They're hard to work into, but they're good. There's a reason they're doing it.
I don't mind, you know. It's like back when I think that people first started being paranoid about like the government listening in on them. As long as I don't say, you know, and I'm going to say it now because it's in text, and it'll probably be taken out of context, but let me tone it down.
Yeah.
The liar in chief should be removed immediately and imprisoned for eternity, along with all the henchmen and women. Yeah. But the thing is, like, there's nothing that I'm going to say or put up that I'm not going to stand behind.
Yeah,
so
no, 100%.
Spread it all you want. You can listen in all you want. You know, as far as I'm concerned, you might learn something, but you're not gonna bring me down with it, because I'm not an evil person, and I'm not trying to hurt people.
Yeah, it's just your thought, your emotion, your expression, and like, even, I don't know, I don't think anyone's going to take what you just said and disagree with it. I believe a majority would completely agree with what you just said and probably said it's a little too polite. But I get what you mean. Kind of. So the cat's good though. They kind of circle back.
Pedro has a little bit of a bacterial infection, sinus infection, but
okay.
He got to go to the vet. I guess it was Friday. He was supposed to go Tuesday, but the people that are supposed to plow my driveway are angry at me because I lost patience with them because they didn't do something else they were supposed to do. So now they don't even pick up my calls, much less return them or plow my driveway. So I was stuck in the driveway until Friday. No, Thursday. Thursday, someone came over because I realized I have to get the driveway paved so that I can snow blower and just blow it off myself, because nobody's going to plow it for me. So, so someone came over and they cleared it enough that I was able to go into town and pick up some stuff and also get some snow tires.
Yeah, those come in clutch about this time of year. To kind of shift gears, and I wanted to talk about a little bit more about. So you put out this recording from that gig in London, right?
No, that's from Brooklyn. It was a
Okay.
Brooklyn coffee shop called Vox Pop,
Gotcha.
and Butler did play bass on one of the songs on that.
Okay, so I've read because I did a deep dive and I've been listening to everything that's on Spotify and everything Howard sent me and diving through your webpage and digging through the press articles I can find off of that. So I think I got my like wires mixed with who did what on what. Wait, that was a lie.
Well,
Okay.
Pearl Harbor, there's probably 25 people on there, and you know, if you were to see the inside credits, what I did at the time, which now seems like it was a little excessive, that's kind of an understatement, but I matched each song with a planet, and I matched each person with an astrological sign. Generally, what their astrological sign was.
Okay.
Credits. The way the credits are is it has the names in alphabetical order, and then it has the glyph for the song that they're playing on.
Well, that's pretty badass. Like, did it pan out? Like, because not everyone's sign could fit with the song they're on, type deal. You know what I mean?
You know,
Like collectively as a group, like these.
At the time, you know, I looked at it a little bit, and it made some sense. I think if I went back now, it would make even more sense.
Gotcha. That kind of goes back to the analyzing post, capturing the whatever intuition inspires you to express or capture.
Yeah, because you know, there's these people that, you know, they're like, oh, I can't listen to my own music, and you know, I hate listening to my own. Well, every time I I love listening to my music, because every time I listen to it, I learn something new.
Yeah, I don't know if like the reason that is people are like, I don't want to be seen as like a narcissist. I'm listening to my music, but it's important to analyze yourself. And someone like you've worked on yourself a lot, so like hearing something like that and like hearing all these pieces come together and be expressed in the way you want to, and then hearing what, like, I didn't hear that bass thing Chris did this, you know, or whatever. That's cool. Like, you don't get that if you kind of just avoid what you've done. And it's important to self-reflect on it and like learn from you. Like, well,
I don't know if you read the story of how the Pearl Harbor came about, and the singer-songwriter that was in the middle story that had the huge hit in the 90s, in the mid-90s.
I have, but for the listeners, if you want to do a quick...
Okay, well, the point is that this was someone, and it was not an accident that we both had Mercury, which is the communication and the way we receive information, planet at 3 degrees Pisces, which is basically an open channel. It's considered a weak Mercury because there's no filter, but that's also a strength if you allow it to be.
Yeah.
But so we both wrote from, you know, this channeling, but he was a Capricorn, so he was all about the fame and the money. Like he was all about the fame and the money. And, you know, when we went on our date, our official date, it was just all, oh, my label's going to drop me. My label's going to drop me.
Yeah.
And also my songs aren't about me, you know, which they so obviously were.
Yeah.
And it's like the disconnect was stunning. Even then, it was stunning to me that he could not recognize that he was writing about himself.
There isn't. I don't know. It's weird. Most times, like, you're asking, like, when you're trying to figure something out and you're talking to someone, you're asking or giving advice you want to hear. That's what I want to say. That's how I want to say it. A lot of times you find yourself giving advice to someone that you want to hear, and it sounds like your friend there wasn't, you know.
Well, he drank the Kool-Aid, you know, the fake Kool-Aid.
And that's going to definitely skew perspective. To kind of shift gears, I have one kind of final question, and it's kind of a big one, but with mental health, I think it's awesome that the live set, you're putting all the funds that come from that to help people find help.
Which nobody's buying.
Yeah,
so.
well, hopefully we can push it a little bit with this. And like, it's weird that there's this stigma of trying to find help and trying to not find help. How would you suggest someone do this? How should someone find help?
Well, it's hard because, I mean, even when I first went to therapy, I felt the stigma. Like, I only went into therapy initially because my marriage was falling apart. So I went into marriage counseling. And then I stayed with that therapist after my marriage, was obviously dead. And it helped me some. The therapist that I used ultimately breached my trust in a major, major way in which he should not, if he's still alive, he shouldn't have been practicing after I found out what he did. But, there's that. But that's hopefully rare. But the other thing is that, this is a historical generational stigma. And, even more so for the black and brown communities, because it seems it's perceived as a signal of it's a sign of weakness, when actually it's a sign of courage and strength. Like, if I said anything, if you have the guts to look at yourself and to figure out why you're fucked up, that's courage. That's strong. Because most people don't have that kind of courage. Definitely. So that's what I would say is it's not weakness, it's courage.
I think that's beautifully said. It's hard to analyze yourself. It's hard, just like we were kind of talking about earlier, it's hard to hear your own voice even when you're talking. And it's it's weird to listen to your playback for some people. But you grow from that, and it does take a amount of courage to accept what you hear, choose to better it or choose to accept it, and move on from there. I think that was beautifully said. Well, Elizabeth, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I just said thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and chatting this. Any last plugs before we wrap it up here?
Plugs for
anything we didn't get to.
I mean, the re-release is Pearl Harbor is coming out. It's going for ads the 1st.
Okay.
And it's I'm working on a video, visual
animated
video. That will be done when it's done. It'll be done when it's right. And the record is officially for sale on the 17th, but it's on pre-sale now for discount from the website.
Awesome, cool.
And it has the original 13 tracks from Pearl Harbor plus 2 that just emerged from like the vault of my subconscious, which my house, and they're kind of special in their own way because there is a love song that is probably the only really pure true love song I ever wrote, because every other one I've ever written has been veiled with metaphors. It's been because of my fear of being heard, I guess.
That makes sense. So with one, there's a lot of love songs, right? So it's hard not to touch upon a metaphor that's already been out there, And then you're putting a lot out there, and that's like just romantic relationships in general, or that like fine line of being crushed or not being crushed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and and I will say this, there are songs that people think are written about romantic relationships, but they're not. They're about my mother.
That's a good tune.
Snow in particular. Snow is not about a romantic relationship, it's about my mother.
I'm gonna hop off here, and I will be in touch with you soon.
Okay, well have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, thanks.
All right, bye.
Bye.
All right, thanks for hanging out. We got one more tune from Alpha Cat. We got Every Day You Break My Heart. If you guys can like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast on all the podcast platforms, it helps this keep going and helps me keep reaching and talking to cool people like Elizabeth. Here we go. One more tune.
You don't see anything I do, and absence doesn't make you fonder. And one more moment is too long for me to stay. Mama, you break my heart every day. Mama, you break my heart every day. Slow down, back up. No one believes a single word you say. Shoot up that poison. It couldn't hurt if you believe that it won't. Don't listen to a word we say. A shame your children don't know better.